Welcome. To give you a little background, I began my career as a performer, and then Dad said get a real degree when I went to school, and I got a computer science degree in the 80s. And I studied a thing called virtual reality then, which really didn't work, but it was very cool. And it was fun to see the worlds come together as time passed. When we look at, you'll see our tagline out of there, taking the starving out of artists. That will make sense near the end of the presentation as to why we lead with that when we talk about evolving an art form that is immersive in the sense that you go into a theater, a live theater, or at least that's how we think about it, and somebody does something for you that should move you to a new level. The first piece that we'll take a look at here is, if we can go next slide. Actually, I think we might be, there we go. This is footage from one of our shows. And this show, the content you're seeing right now is called the B-roll of a show. Now, every show has cameras in there, and they shoot the show so that you can use them for press. When I first started producing on Broadway, all of the camera views were locked off 3 cameras. And I went to the press rep and said, why are we shooting this with just 3 locked off cameras? Well, that's because that's the way it's done, and because we want to give a real picture of what people are going to see when they see it on stage. And I said, yeah, but we're not selling the real experience, we're selling an emotional experience. And as you can start to see by these shots, it's not a locked off shot. It moved in. So one of the first shows that I went in and just, because I own a production company, shot it ourselves, was a show called Memphis back in 2009. And it was almost heresy in what we did. And take a look here at the end. We slowed things down. And this next shot you'll see is now my signature shot on Broadway. All my shows end with this shot. Now, we got letters and notices and things about you can't do that, but there was nothing legally that said you couldn't do it. And hence now I was known on Broadway as the person that wants to come in and change everything. Well, luckily that works very well when you're talking about augmented reality and virtual reality in the system. But we look at the theatrical experience in one of 2 ways, either a passive experience or an active experience. Passive is now. You're sitting there, I'm talking, you're either listening, you're on your cell phone, you're ordering dinner. The 4th wall between you and I is virtually there. Active is something like Sleep No More, if you've heard of that, or if any of you have gone to a murder mystery where you walk around and the actors are interacting with you, or you go to a theme park. And they're all part of a live experience. Normally, when we think of how we are enhancing the world, we look at the active world. But what we're talking about is a hybrid between the passive experience and the active experience, and how we can make those 2 feel both more active. When we looked at how we introduced this into the theatrical world, if I walked in and said right away, we are going to change everything in the during event, meaning once you've walked through those doors and you're watching the show, that's where the red flags pop up. However, we've already been doing it. If you go to London right now, you can see the Tempest. And in fact, Google it, search it, and look at Tempest and Intel. Intel now is using 27 projections to augment a character called Ariel that feels real, that's flying over you during the theater. That is live augmented reality in the theater, but you're not wearing any glasses. There's also things like The Lion King and School of Rock. They've created 360 videos, and those ones are in the pre-section. What we said is, how do we engage people pre and post? Because we're really good at getting people in the theater, and we provide a wonderful experience. We use projections, we use sets, costumes, lights, sound, all of that. And that's where we open the door, is how we can bring this technology in to not scare the creators. Because anytime you get resistance from an industry, and Broadway is in New York City, and in New York City there are certain unions that are very strong, and I like my kneecaps. Therefore, I want them to embrace this whole process. And that's what we've been doing. We've been looking at how we can then create pieces for them to use. So this is the first test we made. This is using the HoloLens. When we design a set on Broadway, we still use a diorama that you made in high school, a $20,000 diorama, a box with pieces on it. So we said, let's build, and right now there's some audio going, so there's using voices to have the lights turn on and off. And we started first with a polygon version, again, to make it simple, so it didn't feel like we were going into the real world. And now we've moved into creating practical set pieces. Now the benefit of this is you can have your set designer who's in London and your director who's in Amsterdam or New York or wherever they are, and they can both be collaborating on the set. And the byproduct of this now also works in the after version that we talk about, meaning somebody has come to see your show, now you want them to walk around your set. Now they're looping around and they're sitting and they're part of the set. So we've rolled this out in a very small version right now to some of the designers on Broadway to get them to buy into it. And they all have the same reaction, which is this at first. And then once they wear it, they look at it at first, and of course everybody's pointing and they can't quite get it, and then they get it, and then they get excited. And then we say, now walk around from the other side. And they say, what do you mean? I said, actually walk around and look from the other side. And that's where the lights just go. You hear the audible, ooh, oh, this is incredible. Now I can actually see dimensionally, the actors can see it ahead of time. And it's that visceral experience that gets buy-in from them on where this can help them in the art form. You can flash forward ahead and you can see that with that aspect of it, now in creating that set, you have it virtualized. Because getting the show out of the theater has been one of the challenges. We film shows, but that's 2D, and you don't have that same kind of experience that you have when you do in this environment. We also looked at the following. We're in a very linear world where we create in a small group, then we find distribution through a theater, and then an audience hopefully comes. It's the, if you build it, they will come. We're promoting this, just like episodic TV does right now, where if you follow any of the new hit shows and you go to Comic-Con, for example, Comic-Con used to be for comic books. Now it's for TV shows, films, and it's all about engaging your audience in the process. And they know the showrunner. 15 years ago, I said showrunner, and people thought you were talking about the person that got coffee for everybody that was on the show. Now people know that these are people that are creatively involved, and they become effectively rock stars. This is the change we're working on in the theatrical world, and this is where, by using these technologies, these 360 videos and differentiations between digital representations and practical representations, we can bring the people in earlier on in the process, which actually helps us from a financial standpoint to understand, are they engaging with the underlying story? And we are getting storytellers to do this. And this is a model that we're evangelizing to the next generation of storytellers. Everything that you see right here is all under our nonprofit, Apples and Oranges Arts. We've created a foundation to further the artistic world. And the easiest way to do that is through education. Now, the beautiful part about this young generation is they look at this technology as their friend and not a threat. And they are embracing everything that we're giving them as examples to take a look at and to associate. And we're moving the industry from this linear approach where you look at content as a step-by-step-by-step model. Now, most people say Broadway or bust. Most Broadway shows are Broadway and bust. 90% of the shows that make it to Broadway lose their money. And there's thousands that never make it there that people spend a lot of money on. And we're saying, well, then why are we doing this? It's because when it works, if you invested in Phantom of the Opera or Wicked or that little show called Hamilton, you now get checks going on, and it's a very nice check that you get coming back. But it doesn't mean the model works. It means that you get lucky effectively once in a time, and if you play the odds, you can get there. Well, we've replaced that with this. And you'll see a key tenet in this is this concept of the mixed reality worlds. And you're looking at your stories as individual stories, where Broadway is now one potential outlet for it. And by then using the technologies that we have immersively to bring people into this overall equation, the goal is to get the storytellers to see that as those steps in building your audience. Because ultimately, you need to be a brand. And once you tip and become a brand, you don't need to market, because the word of mouth does it for you. In fact, when you look at marketing budgets for Broadway shows, you can't convince anybody to buy a ticket. They're not big enough. But yet we still spend lots of money. Well, why not spend it on this? And so we're getting people to look at this as your marketing budget early on, not taking a billboard or doing the things to say how great you are. Involve people emotionally into the content. We've launched another initiative, and this initiative right here is called the Show Venue Match. It's for early stages for the authors of shows, as well as for the creators, as well as the venues. They really don't know how to find each other. And not only do they come in and do we have an AI algorithm that's helping them match, the coolest thing that's being built right now is we are giving them assets. If you are the theater, for example, we're giving them, or at least lending them, cameras, 360 cameras and other pieces to create a visual representation of their theater. That way the artists can see the theater before they ever come to it and have an idea of what they're coming into. And then the same that we'll talk about here in a moment that we're doing with the creators to give them some understanding and visual representation of what's happening in the show. This is our biggest initiative. And in the Theater Accelerator, we are treating new theatrical pieces, and I shouldn't even use theatrical, we should say new stories. We're treating the artists as startups. And what they're doing in the accelerator is they get education in the same way a startup does over 12 weeks, and their final result of it is pitch day that we call Sing Tank. And what they're giving are their assets, and you can't show a whole show, but you can do some really cool things in VR and AR and MR, and hopefully you get a pulse out of somebody and they're interested in the story that you're telling. And that's part of the education, and we've open sourced the education. We're starting to work with colleges and getting them to think about the business aspect more and how they can use these tools. And we've partnered with a couple of theaters, and we're now launching an initiative with UC Irvine where it's the computer science department, fine arts department, and the MBA department for them to work jointly on these projects, where on computer science they're working both on the data analytics side as well as the gaming, AR, and VR side, fine arts from storytelling, and business side that's coming from the School of Business. And all of these we have to test ourselves. And this is the latest show that we're working on. And this summer, we're not going to do it in a traditional theater. We're actually going to take scenes, and we're going to be shooting in different formats. We're going to be using center camera virtual reality for dance numbers, as well as the new 180 technology that places like NextVR, Intel, Jaunt, those people doing, Jaunt's doing 360. And everything that we're doing, we're sharing. And the idea is, if we start doing it and start sharing it, then hopefully people will do the same thing. And we've released a tiny little trailer to do it in a world that gives people in our world an understanding, but it also purposely does not look very Broadway at all. And by simply, you can turn up the volume a little bit on this one. And with these simple teasers, we're already breaking down the barriers in the environment, because now people are seeing what and how we're doing, and it's not threatening them. I promised to tell you that at the end we would look at why we are using taking the starving out of artists. It's because, as I mentioned earlier, we are giving this all away. It's open source. If you have anybody that's interested in any of this, let us know. We would be happy to share it. And thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your conference.